This is an executive order. Discharges your Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and your Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, to begin a process that will hopefully result in the creation of an American sovereign wealth fund.
It's a very exciting event. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which we've never had. We have a lot of things that create wealth, and you're seeing that over the last 2 weeks. I think we've created more wealth. Other people have created de-wealth, the people, my predecessors. We're creating a lot of wealth. Scott, maybe you'd like to say something about it, and I'd ask also Howard to say something about it.
Yes, sir. This is very exciting. We're going to stand this thing up within the next 12 months. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people. We're going to put the assets to work, and I think it's going to be very exciting. We're going to study best practices as done around the world. It'll be a combination of liquid assets, assets that we have in this country as we work to bring them out for the American people.
The extraordinary size and scale of the U.S. government and the business it does with companies should create value for American citizens. If we are going to buy 2 billion COVID vaccines, maybe we should have some warrants and some equity in these companies and have that grow for the help of the American people. So I bring all these things together. I think Scott and I will create an amazing sovereign wealth fund for you, sir.
So other countries have sovereign wealth funds, and they're much smaller countries, and they're not the United States. We have tremendous potential in this country, tremendous. You're seeing that, what's happened just in a short period of time. And as an example, TikTok, we're going to be doing something perhaps with TikTok, and perhaps not. If we make the right deal, we'll do it, otherwise we won't. But I have the right to do that, and we might put that in the sovereign wealth fund, whatever we make, or if we do a partnership with very wealthy people, a lot of options, but we could put that as an example in the fund, and we have a lot of other things that we could put in the fund. And I think in a short period of time we'd have one of the biggest funds, and some of them are pretty large, I must tell you. Some of the Saudi Arabia fund is on the large side, but eventually we'll catch it. But we're going to create a lot of wealth for the fund, and I think it's about time that this country had a sovereign wealth fund. And these two gentlemen and some others are going to work with them very closely, and they'll be heading it up, and they're going to do a great job. Two highly respected people that have done unbelievably well in the world, in the real world. So that's a big deal, huh?
Yes, sir. I think it's going to create value and be of great strategic importance.
The financial world is abuzz with a stunning revelation from President Donald Trump that sent ripples through Wall Street. His proposal to establish a U.S. sovereign wealth fund is making headlines, promising to reshape America's fiscal future. Companies like Tesla and Nvidia are already being whispered about in connections to this fund, poised at potentially being pivotal players in this historic economic adventure. Welcome back, everyone, to Investocracy.
All right, so Chris, I know you're not in this current administration, but I just want to get your take on how this could all work. So generally, sovereign wealth funds, they're usually run with surpluses, often due to commodities like oil. In fact, Norway, the biggest one, it's often called the oil fund. It's from oil surplus money that they invest. The U.S., however, we have a deficit, and it seems to be growing. How would that work here in the U.S.?
So funding is kind of like the Federal Reserve. We have a central bank as well that's independent. Obviously, this is not going to be independent, where it's going to be run likely by the Treasury Department. But it certainly gives the opportunity, I think, for the United States to be able to start seeing gains both in the private and public markets, which we see none of now. Allowing for perhaps us to be able to dig out of that deficit. The federal, because the dollar is the reserve currency, we have a lot more flexibility in how we approach something like a sovereign wealth fund. But I would say that for important to your viewers, I think we're a long way from here to there. This may require Congress's approval, which is going to require 60 votes in the Senate, which would obviously require bipartisan support. So I think that there's a lot of conversations that still have to take place in order for us to get to a place where we're actually standing something up. But over the next 90 days, the president's asked Secretary Bessent to be able to outline what it would look like, how it would run, how he would execute on something like this. So it's certainly a mammoth undertaking that would put the U.S. at par with a lot of other OECD countries.
All right. In your mind, what would be the upside here? The president mentioned using the sovereign wealth fund to buy something like TikTok. That would be a kind of out of the ordinary investment for most of these sovereign wealth funds. They generally invest in, equities and private markets and things like that, as opposed to a media company. What's the big upside, especially for the taxpayer, if we do have this sovereign wealth fund in your mind?
Well, look, I mean, again, as I said before, the U.S. right now is locked out of investing in private and public markets, except for we have a couple of things that are like the OPEC and the International Development Corporation and others that really do some of this work for the United States. But if you do it on a much grander scale, the taxpayer actually should be able to realize the gains of market upsides, both in the public and private markets, as you said, equities, that we don't see now. And so this perhaps could offset some tax policy or some tariff issues or other things that we would otherwise gain revenue for the U.S. government. Again, many other countries have something like this.
So again, I know you're not in the room where these discussions are happening, but potentially, and you mentioned some other ways that the government has funds and invests in things. Another great example is EQT that invested in Palantir, stock that's been surging recently and surging this morning. What would be the difference between something like that, EQT, often called the CIA's venture capital arm, and this sovereign wealth fund? What would be the difference from those other investment vehicles and this one?
I think it'd just be a much grander scale. I think you'd see that the dollars be a lot larger, and I think probably the mandate would be quite large. I think you'd see investment across the world, with the U.S. leading efforts on that. So I think that it could be quite significant in the dollar size and the way that we exert our hard and soft power around the world, which is what, again, we're lacking in this right now, which is it's a vacuum that's filled by the Middle East and on our European allies and many others that do a lot of this work. And the U.S. is just absent from those conversations.
This Trump fund stands apart from previous ideas like the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, as explained by Maple Finance's CEO, Sid Powell. Unlike the one-track focus of the SBR on Bitcoin, the SWF looks to embrace diversity across equities, fixed income, real estate, and commodities, essentially like a cocktail mix for the discerning economic connoisseur. However, creating such a fund isn't just about picking the right assets. As Powell notes, the U.S. needs to tackle its deficit. But before going on with the video, are you into cryptocurrency? If so, check out our second channel, Investocracy Crypto. We bring you breaking news, expert analysis, and the latest trends in the fast-moving world of digital assets. Whether you're a seasoned crypto investor or just curious about the future of finance, we've got something for you. Click the link in the description to subscribe to Investocracy Crypto now. Don't miss out and stay ahead of the game. Now, let's get back to the video.
But we're seeing the headlines hit from the wires. So first on the tariffs front, I heard you guys hit these at the top. Trump is saying, according to the wires, that we haven't agreed yet on tariffs with Mexico and that we will have a big negotiation with Mexico. My interpretation of those comments, since we know earlier that they agreed to this 1-month delay, is that he's signaling that over the next 30 days there will be more talks. They haven't yet decided where to go from there. For now, I would assume that 1-month delay still holds. He also says that he had a good talk with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and we are watching because we know at 3 p.m. today they're expected to speak again. No deal yet with Canada, so a lot to watch coming out of that very consequential phone call later this afternoon. And then on China, they haven't been speaking with China today, but Trump saying now that he'll speak to China over the next 24 hours probably, and that those 10% tariffs are an opening salvo. Those could move higher if they need to see more from China. Then on the sovereign wealth fund front, this was the reason the pool was called into the Oval Office. Trump signed an executive order calling on his Treasury and Commerce departments to take the lead here in setting up a sovereign wealth fund. And Scott Bessent is in the Oval Office as well, telling reporters it should be stood up within 12 months. This was something we heard from Trump about on the campaign trail, saying there was interest in it. President Biden, by the way, was interested in this as well. And on the TikTok front, he said that sovereign wealth fund could potentially be used to make some sort of a deal with TikTok, potentially using some of that money to purchase half of TikTok, as he's been talking about wanting to find a buyer for that half of TikTok. And then finally, guys, just a couple of headlines as well about Elon Musk and all of the news that's been going on today with relating to him and USAID and the Treasury Department's payment system. Trump responding to questions here, saying that Musk is doing things only when we give him approval, saying that Musk has access only to letting people go if we need to, and saying we won't let Elon go places where there is a conflict. So more to come there. We'll be parsing this tape playback as we get it, but obviously the president here covering many of the topics we've been talking about today, guys.
James Woe of DFG paints a vision of an SWF with investments spanning various sectors, mentioning popular stocks like NVIDIA and Tesla. The SWF is drafting a narrative that intertwines financial aspirations with national interests. This dual nature could inject complexity into its performance metrics, with tariff revenue's potential plan derailed by fiscal overspending, as evident in the tumult of 2018 tariff disputes. Crafting an SWF requires fiscal acrobatics worthy of a Cirque du Soleil performance. But before going any further, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
Douglas, Trump was sort of hot on it in his first term. Biden actually floated the idea last year. Now President Trump is signing an order to explore the creation of it. Why wouldn't it be a good idea?
Well, it looks like a solution searching for a problem. They've mentioned a bunch of uses of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. So vaccines, well, we have the NIH, and you can fund that. Infrastructure, we had a bipartisan infrastructure bill. We can do more of that. Counter the Belt and Road, the Chinese initiative. Well, we have the International Development Finance Corporation. Put more money in that. The reality is we have programs and national priorities, and they can be funded. And the source of that money is ultimately going to be the U.S. economy and the tax power of the federal government. So I don't know what problem we're solving if we were to create this. And to create it, you have to raise taxes and stick it in the fund, not spend the money. And that is not something this Congress or administration does very well.
Because the countries that, and for people not listening, a sovereign wealth fund, for lack of a better term, is a government that is generally a rich government, puts a bunch of their excess cash flow into an investment idea, and then they go out and buy stakes or buy companies. Singapore has one, sure. Norway has one, Saudi Arabia has one, a few others, but those are the big three. The difference between us and those three nations is they're not running gigantic and growing debts or deficits.
Correct.
While America's current fiscal stance provides a challenging backdrop, the proposed mix of innovative and traditional assets hints at a promising roadmap to prosperity and influence. But what about you? Do you see the spark of potential in this fund? Share your thoughts. Finally, if you would like to know what companies like NVIDIA have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.